Chess boys and chess girls, the goal of chess is not to win quickly. Oh no, you got half of that right. The goal is to win, but not necessarily quickly. Today, we're going to look at how to win simply, because simple is better. And according to every cooking show I've ever watched, simple, clean, fresh. That's how Fun Master Mike wants to eat. But in chess, what does it mean to simplify? It means take a complicated position and reduce it to an easy one. My question I always ask myself, could I beat Magnus Carlsen in this position? And whenever you get to the answer of yes, that means you have simplified the position. Now, simplifying usually means to make trades, but you've got to trade into a position that you know is winning. Here, white has a rook and 2 pawns. Black has a rook and 1 pawn. Obviously, I'm being nicer to white, but how should white take this pawn? Well, in order to get the most pieces off the board, we should take with the rook. But does that lead to a winning king and pawn endgame? Well, hopefully you already watched my video on the king and pawn endgames. Let's find out. Rook takes pawn, check. That forks the king and the rook. So black pretty much has to capture. Then, of course, we take the rook. Now here, we truly don't know which pawn's going to be captured, but it doesn't matter, because whichever one gets captured, we head for the other one. And remember, in my king and pawn endgame video, we said the king has to get in front of his own pawn. Is he going to make it? Well, let's find out. Don't push the pawn, oh no! The king will just go back to e4, and not only will your king not get in front of the pawn, you'll actually get captured. So, let's play king f2. The king runs to try to defend. We play king g3. The king plays king e5, and if I give black 2 for the price of 1, and black is allowed to play king f5, it will be a draw, because our king will never get in front of the pawn. However, it is not a blue light special, and I know you don't even know the reference because Kmart doesn't exist anymore. The king moves to the square g4. It is not 2 for 1. Black does not get to go twice in a row. And then when black walks in front, we get the opposition. If you don't know how to win, you might want to go back and rewatch my king and pawn endgame video. Now, let's go back to the starting position. What happens if we had capture with the pawn? Not only does that not simplify the position, it actually allows black to more than likely draw by just capturing. If the king takes, this position is a draw because it is so much harder to win with rooks on the board. First of all, the rook and the king might team up on your pawn. Secondly, your king cannot exactly walk in front of your pawn because when he goes to d2, he can't go any further. And third of all, this rook can constantly check your king later in the game and make life very, very difficult. So rook takes was the way to simplify. All right, now for the final 2 positions of our video, I'm going to show you, don't do this very often, but I'm going to show you real life examples that I have used to simplify my chess games. My goal was not to win quickly. My goal was to win simply and to get to a position where my brain could say, sorry, Magnus, but I can beat you even if you were my opponent in this position. Now, let's take a look at the chessboard and let's count very quickly. Both sides have 2 rooks. Both sides have 2 minor pieces, but if you count super careful on those pawns, I should have 1 extra pawn. I've got a B pawn. My opponent doesn't. I've got 3 against 2 on the queen side. Now, that's not a very big advantage, only 1 pawn. Plus, this rook just moved to the square e8. Now, the computer's giving it a question mark for reasons that you're about to figure out. But it looks like a logical move because the rook is aiming at my weakest pawn, at my isolated pawn. However, this allows me to begin the process of simplification. If I tell you white to move and win, well, you're going to be staring at the screen for a long time. There's no winning move, but there is a way to simplify and get rid of the threat on the weak pawn. And in the game, I played, can I get a drum roll, please? Can I get a simpler drum roll? I don't know, does that exist? Anyway, I played rook takes bishop. And look at that. The computer gave me the double exclam. I did not add that glyph. You're going to have to trust me on this one, kids, okay? The computer, for once, agrees with my move. And the whole idea is that I give away a rook for a bishop, but then when the king takes, of course, I skewer the king and the rook. I even got an extra exclam, an exclam? I don't know how to call that. But in any case, I then get the rook back for the price of the bishop. And you might be thinking, Fun Master Mike, you didn't win anything. And my answer is, I did. I won the peace of mind that comes with a simpler position. Not only did I get 2 pieces off the board for each side, but all black has remaining is a rook and a bishop that haven't actually gone anywhere. And in fact, if we fast forward to later in the game, we arrived, boom, at this position, or my advantage has even increased because I have 1 a bishop. And I've got these two pawns facing off against this pawn, about to go up the chessboard. However, if I just start pushing my pawns, this rook could make my life a little bit annoying. He could check my king, he could come back around maybe to here and come behind the pawns or something. No, I'm still winning, but it could be kind of annoying to have to deal with that rook. So I found a very complicated way here. Well, maybe not so complicated for our super talented chess kids, but I found a way to simplify and basically make sure that even the great Magnus cannot beat the somewhat great Fun Master Mike. Do you see it? I played rook d4, and once again, you're going to have to trust me. The computer gave me another double exclam. One of the very few times in life I've earned 2 double exclam moves, and guess what? Neither one of them has actually won material. This skewers the king and the rook. If you move your king, I win your rook, unless you take my rook. But of course, you've already seen my follow-up. Once again, another exclam, knight f3. When the king moves, I simply take the rook, and now the win is elementary, my dear Watson. These 2 pawns obviously can make a pass pawn against this one, or I could just take it. And by the time black's pawn gets here, and then here, and then here, I can just sacrifice my knight for it. Then black has to worry about getting this pawn down the board. If you're thinking that's going to take way too long, you would be right, because the remaining moves were f5. I did take f4, a5, f3. I snatched the pawn. The king took. I pushed. And you can see I am definitely promoting before black does. Black actually resigned. The funny thing is, even if black could push, and then even if I was the nicest chess player in the entire world, which I'm not, I'm probably top 10, but if I was the nicest chess player in the entire world and I let this pawn somehow come all the way down here and make like 3 or 4 moves in a row and promote to a queen, do you see what I would do? I would play the same ending as in Searching for Bobby Fischer. I would play pawn a8 queen, and I would skewer the black king and the black queen. So, could I be fancy? Yeah, I could let the pawn come down the board, move my king like I just don't care, move my king again, not that I would ever actually do this, move my king again like a crazy man, and when the pawn comes to h1 and promotes to a queen, I would promote to a queen, and you can see I will win black's queen on the next turn. Do I have to do fancy things like that? No, I don't. That would not be simple. That would not be the theme of this video. But I'm just showing you because, hey, chess is fun. There we go. Moving on to our final position. This is yet another time in chess where I had a very, very small advantage, and I managed to use simplification to make my life easy. Now, before we get into my moves, let's talk about a little bit of a mistake by my opponent. In this position, black is worse. Black is down a pawn. When you're down, you probably should try to trade pawns, not pieces. Because if you trade pawns, well, there's a lot fewer pawns that can come down the board and make promotions. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that pawn takes pawn is the best move, but black should probably keep those 2 pawns aiming at each other, what we call keeping the tension. Instead, black played this move, pawn to f4. I'm going to give that one a question mark. Can I put a question mark on the board? Let's go ahead and put a question mark. Boom! I do have the power to add to the chessboard. The reason I did not like this move from my opponent is that, number 1, keeps more pawns on the board, which means I have greater chances of promotion. But number 2, black just gave me a protected passed pawn that can never be captured. However, my goal was not to try to move that pawn down the board just yet. After all, the king is waiting. My thought was, hey, yes, I was talking to myself. Please don't laugh. I thought to myself, hey, Fun Master Mike, what do you want to do after this chess game? No, that would be a distraction. I thought, hey, Fun Master Mike, if I get the 2 rooks off of the chessboard, this is a super easy win, because the king has to babysit this pawn, basically keep an eye on that pawn, while my king could just march up the chessboard and win this b pawn, and it's actually really easy. And yes, sorry Magnus, but I could beat you in that position. So, how do I get the rooks off the board? Well, I played the rather simple king c2. And this rook, well, better not go to e3. I'll just take, and when the pawn takes, my king will come to d3, gobble up the pawn. It'll actually be up 2 pawns. So my opponent made the only move, which is rook to b4. And now in this position, I played a very clever move. Probably he was expecting king c3, but that would be too hasty. Then the rook could go to c4 check, or even over to a4, and run free. And then I have to try to win that endgame with that annoying black rook still on the board. In fact, if I move my king up, and the rook does give a check, and then I move my king again, let's just say I go to this square, the rook could even come down and come behind the pawns and bother me. Am I still winning? Probably, but I have a lot of work left to do. So, instead, I played the move b3, pawn b3, takes away these two squares from the rook. Now maybe you're thinking, fun mastermind, the rook can still get to d4. That's true. But then I play rook to d2, which essentially forces the rooks to trade, because the only other way to avoid the trade is to play rook b4, but then my king moves back to c3, and black actually loses the rook. So in the actual game, after the move pawn to b3, my opponent played king to e5, hoping maybe that I played the move king c3, which, by the way, actually might be okay. But the problem with king c3 is that then when the rook moves, and I play rook to d2, I guess black could give a check, but actually this would still kind of work. My king would move back and the rooks are still leaving the board. I thought it was actually a little bit simpler to play rook to d2 first. So instead of king c3, rook to d2 first, and that ensures the rook, when it gets to d4, will be traded off the chessboard. In fact, I'm about to just play the move king c3 and completely win the rook. So my opponent had to play rook to d4. Kind of funny how I made him trade for me. And then in this position, when the rooks trade, it's a very simple win. I played the somewhat clever rook to d3, hoping my opponent would take me, which makes life actually a little bit easier. Kind of a funny position. My opponent eventually ran out of pawn moves. You can see I just made him move his pawn back and forth. And now in this position, when I played the move king to d2, my opponent has to trade rooks, and then immediately has to move the king backward. My king walks to c4, and I won the game super easily by having an extra pawn here and an extra pawn here. So, boys and girls, when you're ahead in a chess game, think of trades as threats. You want to trade pieces. Don't trade a lot of pawns, though. You are going to need a few pawns at the end of the game to make a promotion. Was this video simple? I sure hope so. Now you have a new weapon to win in the endgame.